In this video I'm going to quilt 2 mini quilts in 2 different ways, showing you what your quilting can do for your quilt. Hi there and welcome to a new video on the Sugaridoo channel. My name is Irene and today I'm going to finish the quilting on 2 mini quilts that I made. Let me show you what I worked on. So this is the first mini quilt that I made. Be happy. I think we can all use some positive things around us in these strange times. So I decided to work on some mini quilts, some happy mini quilt. So there is this little bee you see over here, which is a free pattern on my blog. In the description down below you will find all the links of which I'm talking about in this video, and also the link to the blog post where you can download this little bee pattern. And the letters that make happy are my classic ABC pattern. And I think it turned out really cute. So that's the first one that I'm going to quilt today. And the other one is this one. Be kind. And these letters are my brand new funky ABC pattern, which will be released today, where I'm super excited about. Hop over to my webshop if you want to check it out. It's called Funky ABC, and there's also, for both the alphabets, there's also a pattern that holds all the numbers, so 0 to 9. Yeah, so this is the second quilt that I'm going to quilt, and for both I've already cut the bedding and the background fabric. This is going to be with a orange backing, and the other one is going to be with a happy green backing. And I've also picked some thread to work with. This one is going to be green on the bottom and grey at the top. And this one is going to be quilted white at the top and orange at the bottom. So I have all my materials over here. I only need to put some spray basting on it, and then I'm ready to start quilting. I went ahead and basted both my quilts. And before I dive into quilting, I wanted to tell you what I'm going to use as a design for my quilts. So in this video I would like to demonstrate the effect that quilting can have on your mini quilt. So with this one I am going to go for a overall design. So I'm just going to quilt straight lines on the whole design, so it all will blend in nicely into one piece. And this one I'm going to do slightly different. With this one I'm going to quilt around the letters and then do some free motion quilting, I guess, or hand stitching in between the letters to really make those letters pop from the quilt. And I think that's something really fun that you can do with something that has such distinct shapes. So when you do foundation paper piecing, or when you're making something that has really distinct shapes and you quilt around that, you can really make it pop. Yeah, I'm just going to start quilting and show you how I'm going to do it, what I'm using on my machine for foot, and how it's going to look in the end. Super excited about it. Oh, and what I'm also super excited about is, almost forgot to tell you, there are quilt kits for these two. Super excited to have those in my shop. So what you get with the quilt kit for these quilts is you get all the fabric to make the front, you get fabric for the backing, you get the little piece of batting that you need, you get the pattern, of course, for the whole ABC. So if you go for this one you will get the classic ABC, and with this one you will get the whole funky ABC, and fabric for the binding as well. So you get the whole package. So if you want to make one of those, go check it out. I'm going to start with the Be Happy quilt with the overall quilt design. And as a setup I have my Bernina 770 and I'm using a walking foot. This one has a really nice large top transport, so that will perfectly transport your quilt through your machine. I put in my guide bar and I set the distance on 1 inch. So when I'm going to quilt lines, they will be 1 inch apart. And as for the setting for my thread, I am going to put a little bit bigger stitch length on here. So I guess I'm going to go with 3 and then see how that looks. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit on the batting to just check out how the stitch length looks. This is on the back. Oh, that looks great. I've already put a marking on here, so I'm all ready to start, because I only need one marker really, so I can follow that line, and then after that I'm using this one as a guide to make the next line. Let's get started! Let me show you up close. This is what the stitches look like on the front. And now I'm going to use this little bar, and I'm checking that it's on the 1 inch mark. So yeah, that is in place. So what I then do is place it on the line that I just quilted, and then quilt right next to it. Ta-dam! That's line 2. So I'm going to repeat this for the whole quilt and then turn it the other way and sew lines in this direction. The lines in the first direction are done, so now I need to mark the lines in the other direction, and for that I'm just going to place my ruler lined up with the lines that I've already quilted. Yeah, and then I'll just mark one line in this direction. So I'm going to use this as a guide on my first line, and then quilt all the lines from there. All done! So the whole quilt is quilted. You can better see it from that far, I guess, on this side. This mini quilt is done. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it like this. At the end of the video I will square it off. But first I'm going to start on the second quilt. This one. So I just have to switch my thread to white and also my bobbin thread to orange, and then I'm all ready to go. So with this design I'm going to quilt just around the letters at first, and then see how much quilting I'm going to do in the empty spaces, and also of course around the B. So I'm going to stitch on the outside. I'm not going to stitch in the ditch, but I'm going to stitch just beside it. I think it was Susie Quilts who said, why would you make stitches if you don't see them? So yeah, I really like that idea. So I'm just going to stitch right next to my line. And first I'm going to bring up my thread by holding this one and placing my needle down and bringing it up, and there it comes. And that's my bobbin thread. Going to bring those to the back, and then I'm going to start stitching. And I have my machine set in needle down, so whenever I stop sewing my needle will be down and my foot will hover a little bit, so that will make it easy to turn in the corners. And you can go as slow as you want here, and as you see I'm just using my walking foot. So yeah, you can do this with any type of foot really. And then the final stitches. Just going to stitch all the way up to my first stitch and then bring up my needle, put my foot up, then clip off my thread, also my bobbin thread. What I then do is bring up my last stitch. So here's my thread and my bobbin thread. So then I can tie those off and work them away inside my quilt later. So that is one letter done. Let's go for the next three. So for the start of this letter, I decided to use the tie a knot function on my machine, and I'm going to do that again now. So it will tie a knot for me and I can just clip off the thread. I'm very curious how this is going to look at the bottom of my quilt, because this is way quicker, of course. I guess that looks pretty okay. Little knot tied, and now I can just clip off these tiny ends. That saves some time. There is already the third letter done. Time for the final one. So I have finished sewing around all the letters, and before I continue I'm just going to fasten off all the threads and bury them in the quilt, which basically means every 2 threads, so the bobbin and the top thread, I will make a small knot, what I'm trying to do now. So just a simple tiny knot, and then I'll thread those to my needle. Yes, and then I can stick it in the center of the quilt, so I'm going to go into 1 stitch and then just wiggle a little bit to go through the batting, and then pull it all the way out and then pull the knot inward. Yeah, so that's how I bury the threads. But as you could see, I also tried to just tie it off with my machine, and also that worked pretty well, so that's faster. So I guess that does have my preference, because then I don't need to bury all those threads here. So the Be Happy quilt is all done. I'm not going to add any quilting to it. I really like it how it is. So this is a really fast method to quilt. It's really straightforward. Just go over everything to let it blend in with the quilt. But this one isn't finished yet, so I've sewn around all the shapes, and that looks really nice, I think. Really like how it looks already. But you can make this pop even more when you quilt in the background. So when you quilt in the background, the letters will stay unquilted, so those kind of pop compared to the background. At least that's what I'm going for. So to fill this up, I'm going to do some free motion quilting. So I just set up my machine with the Bernina stitch regulator, and that is a special foot with a sensor in it, so it can sense how fast or slow you're moving your fabric, and it will regulate your stitch length according to that. If you're not working on a Bernina, if you don't have a stitch regulator, no worries. You can just use a free motion quilting foot and do free motion with it. I'm going to try out the Bernina stitch regulator. I did do test runs, of course, and I used it before on scraps, but I don't think that I made a real quilt with it, or not a scrappy piece of testing quilt. So I'm just going to yeah, to run it on my quilt. And what I want to make is some kind of loop-de-loop design. That's what I tried out over here. So just some loops and wiggly lines, and then fill all the white space with that. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for a density, something like this. So having my lines pretty close together to really fill up all the white space. So I'm just taking it slow, doing small parts at a time. And I'm feeling a little bit nervous actually to just dive in and do this on camera. Because when you start quilting, of course you can rip out the stitches, but it feels quite definite to just dive in and start quilting. Yeah, but I guess everything is okay, even when it's not going to look as great as I had in my mind. It's also okay. But I do like where it's going, but I still feel a little bit nervous about it. So what I do when I feel like this, because it makes me tense up and makes me sew like this, so I just try to breathe, relax a little bit, make a cup of tea first. So I just leave it like this, take a tiny break, get a cup of tea, and then try to relax into it and just go again, because you can take your time with it. It doesn't need to be finished in one go if you don't want to, or yeah. So if you also have this feeling even without a camera, just take your time, take it slow, and don't worry too much about how it's going to look, because when it's not going to look the way you had in mind, when this is not going to be the way that I imagined it to be, that's okay, because then I probably learned something from it, which is great, because learning means growing and developing your skills. So it's awesome when you can learn something from it, because it goes different than what you expected it to be. But I do already like how it's starting to look, so I'm just going to finish it. But first, some tea. I really like where this is going, and I see that my loops are getting better and better. So here my loops were really flat and thin, and now they are starting to get a little bit rounder and bigger. Here I did a double loop, but oh well. So yeah. I'm just going to continue and practice my loop-de-loops in this design. So whenever I need a break, I'll just run off my thread off my quilt so that I can stop. And when I'm getting in a corner and I can't get out, I just did some travel stitches around here to move to a new space. So the lines around the letters you can just use for travel stitching. Look, see, it's all quilted I'm just going to trim off the sides and square up the mini quilts, put them on my design wall and show you the differences. Ta-da! There are both mini quilts, all quilted and done. They only need a binding around it, but all the quilting is done. And here's the difference. So this one is quilted as one piece and everything blends together because all the lines run over the whole design. So all the letters blend in nicely and it really gets and it really turns into one piece. So everything has kind of the same depth because of the quilting. And this one is something different because the quilting is done in the background. And there is no quilting in the letters and on the B. Those shapes pop a little bit. I really like this effect, but I also like how this blends all the letters in with the quilt. So I like both versions. I think this one is easier to make because it's just straight lines. You can do it with your regular foot that you have on your machine. And this one, I did it with free motion quilting, and I used just a straight stitch with my walking foot around the letters. But if you don't want to go for free motion quilting, you could also fill up the space with your walking foot or with your normal straight stitch foot. Just make straight lines and go around the shapes that you made around the letters and fill in the white space that way. That's also possible, and that will also give you this effect. It doesn't really matter, I think, the pattern that you use in between the letters, but it just matters that it's quite dense quilted, so that it is more dense than the width of the letters. Because when you make it more dense than this space, so the size of the letters, then it will make the letters pop. So that are two different versions to quilt a mini quilt. I'm very curious what way has your preference. So let me know in the comments down below what kind of quilting you prefer. Do you just go with straight line quilting or do you also try free motion quilting? I would love to read it down below what you think of the two ways that I quilted these mini quilts. So just a little recap on what is happening on Sugaridoo today. So I launched the funky ABC alphabet pattern. So there's the alphabet pattern and there's also a 1, 2, 3 pattern. And I have updated my classic ABC pattern. So the letters that I made for this quilt, I think I can show you. These are the first version, and you can see that there is white space around the letters. Maybe it's easier if I just put it in the screen over here. So that's the difference between the old version and new version. If you have bought the previous version before, probably you will already have the new version in your email, the updated version. And if you haven't got an email from me, just send an email to info@sugaridoo.com with your order number, and then I'll make sure to reply with the new version of the quilt pattern. And I also made a numbers pattern for the classic ABC. So that is about the patterns. And then for these two I have quilt kits available. So all the fabrics included, pattern included, and the batting, binding, backing. So go check it out on sugaridoo.com. Thank you so much for being here and watching this video. I really hope that it brings some joy to your day and that you enjoyed it. And that's it. That is the end of this video. Hope to see you again next week. Bye!